University of Holy Cross, a century of teaching the mind and heart, is made possible by Phyllis M. Taylor, Joseph and Sue Ellen Canizero, Dr. and Mrs. David Buck Landry, Marianites of Holy Cross, the Ray and Jessica Brandt Family Foundation, Scott and Jane Wolfe, Philip and Donna Blanchard, Joe and Aaron Caruso, Jerry and Jack Stumpf Jr., Gulf Coast Bank and Trust Company, 5th District Savings Bank, and by James and Marcia Hubbard, Milton and Susan Lackey, Mike and Terry Lopez, and Ken and Betty Tedesco.
And as we were planning our wedding in 1985, she said to me, you know, I'm willing to be married to you, but I'm not going to be married to a man that doesn't have a college degree. And like a week later, I found Our Lady of Holy Cross College.
You're taught service. You're taught that if God has given you much, much is expected. And so part of a Holy Cross education is service, is giving back to the community.
To me, that's what the world needs. It needs more of that cultivating of the heart. You can have all the brains you want, but if you don't have that compassion, which comes back to our Marianite charism, then we're not going to change the world.
Through the people that you talk to, they'll all have their human interest story that goes back to the generosity of these religious that started in France 200 years ago, and came to Louisiana. Who would have known?
The year was 1841. The first wagon train arrived in California. A New Orleans man invented Venetian blinds. William Henry Harrison became the first U.S. president to die in office. He served for just 1 month. Far away in France, a new beginning. Father Basil Moreau founded the Marianites of Holy Cross, a growing congregation of sisters who would travel to faraway mission fields, including the strange and wild new world called America. They would bring with them the desire to spread the gospel and the love of education.
One phrase that really is used in all of the Holy Cross institutions is, the mind will not be cultivated at the expense of the heart, not only for the next life, but for this life as well.
In those days, the mission of many religious men and women would expand in response to a desperate call for help.
And the history of schools in New Orleans is the story of yellow fever, typhoid, and malaria. So Bishop Antoine Blanc issued a call to all religious communities in the United States to come here and staff orphanages because people were dying.
As epidemic after epidemic spread through the New Orleans area, more and more children were left alone. In 1849, 3 of the Marianite sisters heard the call for help and hurried to St. Mary's Orphan Asylum in New Orleans. There they found 75 starving boys crowded into the orphanage. The sisters begged for food, found benefactors, and thanks to the help of the Ursuline nuns nearby, they survived and thrived.
The ministry kept evolving, and as New Orleans was only a microcosm of what was happening in the United States at the time, girls had no opportunity for education.
So they took that on too, expanding, starting an industrial school for girls, 9 young pupils taught to sew. This work was for the making of coarse clothing for the slaves. And though neither very profitable nor pleasant, was accepted with gratitude, since it would provide a means of subsistence for the children and thus prove that they could support themselves. Eventually, with the help of generous friends, the sisters were able to buy some property, a block along what is now St. Claude Avenue. The price was $275. They wanted to build a school for girls. That was in 1861. That same year, Louisiana seceded from the Union, and the country was at war with itself. Despite Union occupation of New Orleans, uncertainty, and food shortages, the sisters started building. In 1862, laying the cornerstone of what would become Academy of Holy Angels. They awarded their first high school diploma 5 years later. The next 4 decades would see enrollment rise and fall, but by the early 1900s, the sisters knew that no matter the enrollment, the teachers themselves would need more education. The early 1900s saw the world take flight. The silver screen came to life in movie theaters popping up across the country. The assembly line helped make motor cars more than a novelty, competing with electrified streetcars for space on new roads. Soon, the streetcar passed right in front of the Academy of Holy Angels, bringing students in and taking sisters out to teach in Marianite schools forming all across the New Orleans region.
And at one time, probably the Marianites had more schools in New Orleans, metropolitan New Orleans, and probably the state than any other religious order of women.
The Marianites were already conducting teacher training classes. Priest professors were brought in to teach and help widen their worldview, but they knew they would eventually need state certification. They took the bold step and appealed to lawmakers in Baton Rouge.
Everybody loves a baby, that's why I'm in love with you, pretty baby.
In 1916, the song Pretty Baby was one of the most popular tunes in the country.
Pretty baby.
It was the year that saw the formation of the National Park Service. The first woman elected to Congress, Jeanette Rankin of Montana, took her seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. The Saturday Evening Post began a new tradition featuring a Norman Rockwell painting on its front cover. And in New Orleans, on July 6, 1916, a college was created.
Be it enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Louisiana.
The state had given the Marianites approval to be a college, to hand out diplomas and give degrees from what would be known as the College Department. It was a milestone, but it didn't take long for the sisters to realize what all of that entailed, and they weren't ready yet. They worked on strategy as they continued their education training classes. The following year, the U.S. joined the world at war, and the year after that, as World War I came to an end, New Orleans became a battleground of a different sort. The flu pandemic hit the city hard. Hospitals, makeshift ward rooms, and homes were filled with the sick, dying, and dead. There were more than 54,000 cases of flu here. Nearly 3,500 died. Schools, churches, public buildings were ordered shut down. No large gatherings, sporting events, and ceremonies. Even funerals had to be small and private. But as the threat passed and school reopened, the sisters found a higher education ally in another nearby Catholic institution. Loyola University offered to help. By allowing the sisters to earn college degrees with them, Loyola gave the Marianites the opportunity to build the staff and the status to grow their own school. So the sisters left their convent walls for university halls, many earning bachelor's degrees and more.
The sisters, when the college first started, didn't have enough sisters to actually teach you know, in the college. And to me, it's very edifying that they went back and they got courses at Loyola University so that they could get masters and come back and teach the rest of the sisters. You know, to me, that's that passing on of what you learn from one person to the next.
During those years, the non-certified teachers training continued at the academy until eventually in 1932, the State Board of Education gave its stamp of approval to Holy Cross Normal School, a 2-year program. 29 sisters enrolled in the fall. From there, they would go to Loyola or other Catholic colleges and universities in and out of state.
The normal school, the Our Lady of Holy Cross College or the Academy of Holy Angels college department was chartered as a normal school. And that was the terminology that was used, not only in Louisiana but throughout the country, that there were many, quote, normal schools, which were schools to educate and to certify teachers.
In 1938, the sisters proved they could meet current requirements, and the state gave them permission to operate a 4-year college under the name Holy Cross Normal College. Tuition was set at $10 per course, summer school, including room and board, $90. In 1941, they changed the name to Academy of the Holy Angels College Department, eventually shortened to Holy Angels College. At their first graduation the following year, more than 30 sisters received diplomas. With the convent and the classes filling up, they all knew they were running out of room. They would cross that bridge when they came to it, literally. In the mid-1940s, the soldiers came home. World War II was over. There was a new president. Harry Truman was now in office. Jackie Robinson was playing first base for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And the world witnessed the magic of the Polaroid as pictures appeared in the palm of their hand. At the Academy on Rampart, new sisters were joining the ranks of the Marianites. The college department opened its doors to other religious sisters as well. And soon, even lay teachers in the many Marianite-run schools were taking college classes.
When we got in to the convent and started school, we went to this one little room that was called the normal room, that had been named that from when we had a normal school. You took 2 courses until you finished. There was no semester break. You finished one, you started the other. You were off for holidays, naturally, We kept going until we finished.
They needed more space to live and to learn. The answer to their prayers would come from seemingly far away, from a place many of them had never been, across the river on the West Bank. Developer Ernest Norman and his wife Elsie loved the Marianites and their mission to educate, and they wanted the sisters, the teachers, to have their own place. In 1947, they offered them a 40-acre tract of wooded land in the area known as Aurora Gardens. There were already some homes in the area, but much of it was still undeveloped. The only stipulation on the donation, to use the land for religious and educational purposes.
Woodland Highway was a shell road until 1958, I believe, is when they paved it. It was a 4-lane shell road where the cars would go down at 60, 65 miles an hour, and it would be a cloud of white dust over everything.
Looking beyond the dust and the trees, the Marianites could see a future. Figuring it would take at least $1 million to build, they began more than a decade of fundraising. They wanted to have 1/3 of the money before they would even start. A support guild was formed. Even sisters were asked to buy a brick for $1 to have ownership in the new project. By 1958, they were all posing for pictures for the groundbreaking. Construction took 18 months. At 2:30 in the afternoon of Saturday, April 2nd, 1960, a crowd of nearly 1,000 people came to witness the dedication and blessing of the new provincial house, novitiate, and college. A big storm was pushing in that day, and umbrellas were popping up as Archbishop Rummel blessed the new facilities. Soon, everything was moved indoors to get out of the rain.
When I came as an 8th grader, the building was dedicated, yes. And it was a horrendous day. The rains could not be worse. Mud. I kept thinking the poor sister's going to have to clean all of this up because they didn't have custodial staff. It was the sisters who did the cleaning. So all I could think of is all these people tracing through this building.
It stormed big time. My mother was so upset because when they let everybody go through the house, through the convent to see where we would be and what have you, the floors were shining like glass. And almost to her death, my mother still talked about the mess that we tracked through the convent, and all those floors had to be cleaned again because it was such a mess on the day of the dedication.
2 days later, the Marianites moved in, leaving behind the familiar at Academy of Holy Angels.
You could hear the oohs and ahs as we crossed over. Wow, ooh, look at me. Oh, we live over there. You know, I remember somebody pointing out, over there, can you see down there by the turn? That's where Holy Angels is.
We thought we were going out to the boondocks. I think we cried all the way across the river because we had no idea what this place was like.
We came here, Holy Cross was here, but none of these subdivisions were here, and so it was kind of like the college in the woods.
It was all so new and clean. Fresh chalkboards, bright white walls, lots of windows, modern conveniences like a PA system. There was air conditioning and a brand new cafeteria kitchen.
Coming from an old setting that we had at Holy Angels, it was just like a whole new world.
They did bring with them to this new world some of the old furniture from the academy. Even the chandelier in the front hall moved with them. One thing that did not make the move, the name. In honor of the first school set up by their founder in France, Notre Dame de Sainte-Croix. It would now be known as Our Lady of Holy Cross College, the first and only four-year college on the West Bank.
Now, the very first night we were here, it was great silence, but I heard this unusual noise, and we were two sisters to a room, and I said to one of the other sisters, "What's that?" And she said, "Nutria." And I said, "What's that?" "Shh, I'll tell you tomorrow morning."
For a while, there were a lot of new sights and sounds, learning what an armadillo was, watching for snakes when they went outside. Education by experience.
At recreation time, I guess I was a novice by then, sometimes we would go outside, and Sister Mary Carmel taught us PE. Well, what she would do sometimes, we'd march around, and then she gave us a sickle, and would cut grass. That was part of our PE credit.
The 47 acres that we owned, this little piece of property had been cleaned, but the rest of it, the postulants and novices and temporary professed, cleaned it during their recreation. Cleared it, literally cleared it. Pulling, cutting. Oh yeah, we can do just about anything.
The Marianites lived here, worked here, went to school here. This was more room than they had ever had, but their own space was still quite small. Tiny rooms, their personal quarters, were often shared.
They were really cubicles. You know, you had the basics, the bed, the sink. You didn't have the bathroom. You had common bathrooms and showers. So we used to always tease about having to leave the room to change our minds. It was so small.